Marilyn Monroe, born Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1, 1926, in Los Angeles, California, became one of the most enduring and tragic figures in Hollywood history. Her life, though short, was filled with dramatic highs and heartbreaking lows. Marilyn Monroe's rise to fame was meteoric, but it was accompanied by a series of personal struggles, many of which remained hidden from the public eye until after her death. Growing up in poverty and instability, Marilyn's early years were fraught with hardship. Norma Jean was raised in a world of uncertainty, often separated from her mother, who was institutionalized for mental illness. As a result, Norma spent most of her childhood in foster homes and orphanages, never experiencing the nurturing environment many children take for granted. This early lack of stability would influence her emotional life in profound ways. Her turbulent childhood instilled a deep desire in her for affection and acceptance, but it also shaped her as a woman who learned to hide her vulnerabilities behind the carefully crafted public persona of Marilyn Monroe. Throughout her rise to fame, she would struggle with a sense of abandonment and loneliness, which would haunt her well into adulthood. Nevertheless, her magnetic beauty and undeniable talent eventually led her to the glamorous world of Hollywood. By the time she was in her teens, Norma Jean's life had begun to settle into a more predictable pattern. After living in numerous foster homes, she was eventually placed with a family friend, Grace McKee. Grace played a pivotal role in Norma Jean's early adult life, becoming a maternal figure who encouraged her to pursue modeling. It was through this connection that Norma Jean began her foray into the world of entertainment. At the age of 16, Norma Jean married James Dougherty, a man who was stationed in the military during World War II. The marriage, though brief, was partly an escape from the difficult living situations she had faced in her youth. This period in her life, while outwardly stable, was not the answer to her deeper desires. She found herself caught in a cycle of self-doubt and longing for something greater. It was during the war years that she became a model, posing for magazines and advertisements. Her beauty was undeniable, and it wasn't long before she was noticed by talent scouts. But it was a pivotal moment in 1946 when she signed a contract with 20th Century Fox that truly set her career in motion. The studio began to transform her from the shy, uncertain young woman into the glamorous sex symbol the world would come to know as Marilyn Monroe. Though she was initially cast in small, uncredited roles, her talent was beginning to be recognized. Monroe's first significant film role came in The Asphalt Jungle, 1950, directed by John Huston, in which she played a small but memorable part. While she didn't have much screen time, her performance was enough to leave a lasting impression on the audience. She was soon cast in other films, though her early roles often required her to play the stereotypical dumb blonde. Yet even in these roles, Monroe's charm and vulnerability shone through, which ultimately captivated the public's imagination. Marilyn Monroe's breakthrough came with Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, 1953, a film in which she portrayed Lorelei Lee, a showgirl with an eye for wealth. The film was a massive success, and Monroe's star power skyrocketed. Her platinum blonde hair, breathy voice, and curvaceous figure became synonymous with her name, cementing her status as the quintessential sex symbol of the 1950s. However, behind the image of the glamorous movie star was a woman who struggled with deep insecurities and emotional wounds. Monroe's fame brought her both adoration and exploitation. Despite her success, she often felt trapped by the image Hollywood had crafted for her. She was constantly being pushed into roles that emphasized her beauty over her acting ability. At times, Monroe would try to rebel against this typecasting, but her attempts to be taken seriously as an actress were frequently met with resistance. It was clear to Monroe that her success was largely dependent on her appearance, rather than her talents as a performer. This realization made her question her worth beyond her looks, feeding into her growing feelings of inadequacy and loneliness. Hollywood, with its glittering lights and promises of fame, proved to be an emotionally isolating place for Monroe. She often felt alienated from her colleagues and struggled to form lasting, meaningful relationships. The industry's tendency to reduce her to her physical attributes only deepened her sense of being misunderstood. She craved love and validation but was met with superficiality. Monroe found herself torn between the fame she so desperately wanted and the internal struggle to remain true to herself. Monroe's vulnerability made her an object of both desire and pity, but few people truly understood the woman behind the image. Her relationships were often strained, and her marriages, though filled with passion, were tumultuous. She was married 3 times. First to James Dougherty, then to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio, and finally to playwright Arthur Miller. These relationships, though deeply felt, were fraught with their own complications, with Monroe constantly searching for love and stability in the wrong places. Marilyn Monroe's personal life was plagued by the very same issues that haunted her professional life: loneliness, insecurity, and a deep desire for love and acceptance. Her first marriage to James Dougherty ended in 1946, not long after Monroe's career began to take off. Her second marriage, to Joe DiMaggio, was one of the most publicized relationships of the era. Though their love for each other was genuine, their marriage faced insurmountable challenges. DiMaggio, despite his admiration for Monroe, struggled with her fame and the attention she received from other men. The marriage ended after just 9 months. Monroe's third marriage to Arthur Miller, one of the most respected playwrights of the time, was initially seen as a moment of intellectual and emotional connection for Monroe. However, this relationship, too, was fraught with complications. Monroe, deeply insecure and struggling with her mental health, found herself feeling increasingly isolated in her marriage to Miller. She was unable to bear children, which only added to her feelings of inadequacy. Though they shared an intellectual bond, their relationship eventually deteriorated, and they divorced in 1961. Monroe's marriages, as well as her numerous romantic entanglements, revealed the deep emotional wounds she carried throughout her life. Despite her outward confidence and her role as a global sex symbol, Marilyn was a woman searching for something deeper: love, affection, and the validation that had eluded her throughout her tumultuous childhood. As Marilyn Monroe's fame continued to soar throughout the 1950s, so did the pressures that accompanied her public image. The dazzling smile, the radiant charm, and the sensual allure that made her an icon also concealed the deep emotional wounds she struggled to face every day. Behind the glamorous veneer, Marilyn was in a constant battle with her inner demons. Fame and beauty, it seemed, had come at a steep cost. Marilyn was never fully prepared for the weight of stardom. Her childhood had been marred by neglect, abandonment, and instability, and this emotional baggage followed her into adulthood, even as she stepped into the bright lights of Hollywood. Though she had reached the pinnacle of success, she never felt like she belonged in the world she inhabited. The loneliness that had characterized her early life had never fully disappeared. It merely intensified as her fame grew. Despite her enormous success, Marilyn often felt like an imposter, someone who was only valued for her appearance, not her mind or her true self. She was trapped in the role that Hollywood had cast her in, the blonde bombshell, who could make men weak in the knees but who had little more to offer than her beauty. In interviews, she would sometimes try to express her dissatisfaction with the role she was given. But the industry responded with more of the same: shallow, glamorous characters who lacked depth. This cycle of typecasting slowly chipped away at her sense of self-worth. The pressure to maintain the perfect image was unbearable. For Marilyn, it wasn't just about staying beautiful or performing well on screen. It was about proving that she was worthy of love and acceptance. the constant barrage of media attention, the expectations of her fans, and the ever-present scrutiny from the Hollywood elite only deepened her feelings of isolation. She was no longer seen as a woman with a mind of her own, but as a public commodity, something to be adored, objectified, and consumed. The more successful she became, the more she felt like she was losing control over her own identity. In an attempt to numb the pain and escape the suffocating pressures of fame, Marilyn turned to substances. It started with sleeping pills, which she used to cope with her insomnia, a condition that had plagued her for years. As the demands of her career intensified, so did her reliance on these pills. Over time, her prescription drug use escalated, and soon she was using a cocktail of substances, sleeping pills, painkillers, and alcohol, to quiet the constant turmoil in her mind. The substance abuse was, in part, an attempt to silence the voices inside her head. The overwhelming self-doubt, the crippling anxiety, the fear of not being good enough. The drugs provided her with temporary relief from her emotional agony, but they also took a toll on her body and mind. Marilyn would frequently miss rehearsals and be late to set. At times, her behavior became erratic, and directors began to grow frustrated with her unprofessionalism. What the public did not see was the woman behind the fame. A woman struggling to find peace in a world that demanded perfection. Marilyn was not the carefree, glamorous star the public adored. She was a woman haunted by her past. A woman whose emotional fragility was masked by the Hollywood persona she had been forced to adopt. At times, she would break down on set, unable to perform due to her exhaustion and inner turmoil. She would weep between takes, feeling trapped in a world where she was constantly expected to smile, to be beautiful, to be perfect. But underneath, she was unraveling. In her private moments, Marilyn would confide in those close to her, revealing the depths of her emotional distress. She longed for true connection, for understanding. But the people around her could only see the facade she had created. Her struggles with mental health and addiction inevitably took a toll on her relationships. In 1954, Marilyn married her second husband, baseball legend Joe DiMaggio. Their relationship was passionate, but also fraught with tension. Joe, who was protective of her, became increasingly frustrated with her reliance on alcohol and pills. He was a man who wanted to protect his wife, but he did not understand the depth of her pain. The marriage was short-lived, and they divorced in 1955. Marilyn's third marriage, to playwright Arthur Miller, seemed to offer a chance for stability. Arthur was intelligent and sensitive, and he appreciated Marilyn for her intellectual abilities as much as her beauty. However, the pressures of their relationship became too much. Marilyn's ongoing mental health struggles and her emotional dependency on Arthur began to strain their marriage. She felt trapped between her desire for intellectual stimulation and her need for emotional comfort. Arthur Miller's intense intellectualism and his quiet demeanor were difficult for Marilyn to handle. She craved attention, affection, and reassurance, but Arthur, though supportive, was not always able to give her the love she needed in the way she wanted. Their marriage began to unravel, and in 1961 they divorced. Marilyn's struggles with loneliness and abandonment became even more pronounced. She had married 3 times, but the love and stability she had longed for seemed perpetually out of reach. Throughout her life, Marilyn Monroe was searching for love, not just from men, but from her audience, her peers, and most painfully from herself. Despite being adored by millions, she never truly felt loved. She was a woman who felt invisible in her vulnerability, a woman whose worth was constantly being judged by her appearance rather than her character. Her need for validation was so strong that she often made questionable decisions in relationships, clinging to men who could offer her temporary affection, even if they couldn't provide her with the emotional security she needed. She often sought the approval of powerful men, such as President John F. Kennedy, with whom she is rumored to have had a brief affair. This relationship, while fleeting, symbolized her ongoing search for affection from the highest echelons of society. Marilyn craved the validation of men like Kennedy, men who symbolized power, status, and success. She wanted to feel wanted, not just for her beauty but for her soul. Yet, the brief affair with Kennedy only left her feeling more hollow than before, further cementing her belief that love was something she could never truly have. By the early 1960s, Marilyn's health was deteriorating rapidly. Her reliance on prescription drugs and alcohol had taken a toll on her body, and her erratic behavior on set began to affect her career. She would often miss rehearsals or appear unprepared for her roles. Directors and producers, frustrated with her unreliability, began to distance themselves from her. Marilyn's professional life, once flourishing, now seemed to be slipping away, and her personal life was equally tumultuous. The pressure of living up to her own image, combined with the deep-seated emotional pain she carried, eventually led to a breakdown. She began to retreat further into herself, unable to keep up the facade of the glamorous, carefree star. Her last completed film, The Misfits, 1961, is often seen as the epitome of her fragile state, emotionally raw and incredibly personal. In the film, Marilyn's character is a woman struggling to find her place in the world, much like herself at the time. The Misfits became a symbol of the actress's internal battle, and her struggle to stay afloat in an industry that no longer understood her. On August 5, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her Los Angeles home at the age of 36. The cause of death was an overdose of barbiturates, though the circumstances surrounding her death remain shrouded in mystery. Theories abound. Some suggest that it was a suicide, while others believe it was accidental. However, the tragedy of her death was undeniable. The world had lost an icon, but more than that, it had lost a woman who had spent her entire life searching for something she could never quite find. Peace. Marilyn's death sent shockwaves through Hollywood and the world at large. For many, she was more than just a sex symbol. She was a symbol of the deep emotional struggles that often accompany fame. Her life was one of unrelenting pressure, public scrutiny, and internal chaos. And her death was a heartbreaking conclusion to a life marked by both dazzling success and profound sadness. Even in death, Marilyn Monroe remains an enduring icon. Her films continue to captivate audiences, and her image has been immortalized in countless works of art, music, and literature. She remains a symbol of beauty, vulnerability, and the price of fame. Monroe's life, though tragically short, has become a source of inspiration and fascination for generations of fans and artists. Marilyn's legacy is a poignant reminder of the human cost of fame and the emotional struggles that can lie hidden behind the public facade. She remains not only a cultural icon, but also a symbol of the complexities of being a woman in the public eye, constantly praised for beauty but often disregarded for depth. Marilyn Monroe was more than just a pretty face. She was a woman who sought love and validation in a world that could never fully give it to her. And in the end, her voice, her story, and her struggles live on, echoing through the halls of history. Marilyn Monroe's life, though filled with dazzling moments of fame and success, was plagued by an ever-deepening internal struggle. By the summer of 1962, she was at the height of her fame, yet trapped in a private agony that only those closest to her could partially comprehend. She had endured the toll of fame, mental health challenges, substance abuse, and a string of failed relationships. But in those final months of her life, it became increasingly clear to those who loved her, and perhaps even to herself, that she was nearing a breaking point. The cracks in Marilyn's carefully constructed world had been evident for years. Her substance abuse, long a silent companion, had worsened. Her reliance on sleeping pills and painkillers to cope with her insomnia and emotional pain had begun to take an irreversible toll on her health. She had sought help, and at times she showed signs of recovery. But the pressure of maintaining the public persona of Marilyn Monroe, while dealing with the private demons of insecurity, abandonment, and loneliness was overwhelming. Those close to her, particularly her therapist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, had tried to help. They knew how deeply Marilyn craved love, stability, and approval, but the solution seemed always just out of reach. As her health deteriorated and her emotional state became increasingly fragile, Marilyn became more withdrawn. She canceled appointments, withdrew from her work, and began to isolate herself from even her closest friends. She struggled with feelings of abandonment, often feeling like she had nothing left to give or no one left to turn to. In the weeks leading up to her death, Marilyn's behavior grew more erratic. Her professional life, which had already been faltering due to missed rehearsals and late arrivals on set, was slipping away. Despite her brilliant performances in films like The Misfits, 1961, and Some Like It Hot, 1959, which demonstrated her immense acting talent, she was no longer able to sustain the level of discipline required by Hollywood. As her emotional struggles continued, her personal life became even more tumultuous. Her brief affair with President John F. Kennedy, though rumored and not publicly acknowledged, became a source of intense inner conflict. Monroe had often sought relationships with powerful men in an attempt to fill the emotional void inside her. The brief relationship with Kennedy was one of the most significant in her life, yet it ultimately left her heartbroken and unfulfilled. Monroe's desperate need for affection and validation from the world's most powerful men, including the president, was rooted in her profound feelings of loneliness. The fact that Kennedy, after their brief fling, moved on to another part of his life left Marilyn feeling even more lost, more invisible. The night before her death, Marilyn's life was filled with people who loved her, but she often felt a deep loneliness that no one could fill. The night before her death, August 4, 1962, she was alone in her Los Angeles home. Her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, had noticed that Marilyn seemed restless, agitated, and uneasy. She had recently been prescribed a new dose of barbiturates, and the combination of drugs in her system made her both tired and agitated. Murray, concerned about Marilyn's well-being, attempted to check on her throughout the night. But Marilyn, in a moment of quiet despair, did not respond. Instead, she spent the evening alone, in the silence of her home, reflecting on the pain she had suffered for much of her life. It was in these moments that Marilyn's sense of being trapped, the unrelenting pressure of her fame and her internal emotional turmoil, reached a breaking point. In the depths of her sorrow, she seemed to have nowhere to turn. At 3 a.m. on August 5, Marilyn's housekeeper finally called Dr. Ralph Greenson, her psychiatrist, who had been helping her cope with her mental health issues. Greenson arrived at the house and found the door locked. It was then that he broke in, only to find Marilyn Monroe lying in her bed, unconscious. She had overdosed on sleeping pills, a tragic end to a life that had been filled with both brilliance and heartache. The news of Marilyn Monroe's death sent shockwaves through the world. Her death, at just 36 years old, was tragic in its own right, but the manner of her passing, an overdose, left many questions unanswered. Was it suicide? Was it accidental? Or was it something more sinister? The speculation began almost immediately, with various theories swirling around her death. The coroner's report officially ruled her death as a probable suicide, but the circumstances surrounding her passing were anything but clear-cut. Conspiracy theories abounded, ranging from claims of foul play to rumors of a cover-up involving the Kennedys. Though the exact cause of her death remains a subject of debate, what was undeniable was the profound loss of an iconic figure who had captured the hearts and imaginations of millions. Her friends, colleagues, and fans were left reeling in disbelief. Those who had known Marilyn personally, such as Joe DiMaggio, her former husband, were devastated by her passing. DiMaggio, who had always cared for Marilyn deeply, arranged for a private funeral, a small, intimate ceremony for the woman he had never fully been able to let go of. The public, too, mourned her loss, but in a way that reflected the complexity of their relationship with her. Monroe had been both a symbol of beauty and vulnerability, a woman who had given everything to her career, but whose personal life remained shrouded in mystery. The funeral was a quiet affair. Only a few close friends and family members attended, with Joe DiMaggio standing by her side. The media, which had so often exploited her, were kept at bay. Yet despite the low-key funeral, Marilyn's death marked the end of an era. Her passing left behind a vacuum, a sense of loss not just for Hollywood, but for the entire world that had come to adore her. The legacy of Marilyn Monroe. Despite the tragedy of her untimely death, Marilyn Monroe's legacy has endured. Her films, her music, and her iconic image have continued to captivate audiences around the world. She remains one of the most recognizable figures in Hollywood history, her name synonymous with beauty, sex appeal, and tragedy. But Marilyn Monroe was much more than just a dumb blonde. She was an actress of incredible depth, a woman who struggled with personal demons while attempting to carve out a career for herself that was meaningful beyond her image. She was a talented, intelligent woman who had the potential to transform Hollywood. But she was never fully able to break free from the constraints placed upon her by the industry and society. Her struggles with addiction, mental health, and loneliness have become a part of her story, but so has her ability to shine through it all. Marilyn Monroe's career, though cut short, paved the way for women in Hollywood to be more than just pretty faces. She was a trailblazer, a woman who changed the way we think about beauty, vulnerability, and the complexities of fame. Her image continues to haunt the popular imagination. From the famous white dress scene in The 7-Year Itch to her sultry renditions of Happy Birthday, Mr. President, Marilyn Monroe's moments on screen have become immortalized in film history. But beyond the image, it is the story of a woman who fought for recognition as a serious actress, who longed for love, who was constantly misunderstood, and who tragically succumbed to the pressures of fame that remains etched in our collective memory. Marilyn Monroe's legacy lives on in the work of artists, filmmakers, and musicians who continue to draw inspiration from her life. She is remembered not only as a star but as a woman who lived with intensity and passion, whose light burned too brightly and whose heartache was far too great to ignore. Marilyn Monroe may have left this world too soon, but her legacy has lived on, growing in stature with each passing year. Despite the tragic end to her life, Marilyn Monroe became more than just a Hollywood icon. She transformed into a symbol, a cultural phenomenon whose influence continues to reverberate far beyond her time. Her untimely death at 36 shocked the world, and left an indelible mark on the collective memory. However, it also solidified her place in history. People mourn not only the loss of a beloved star, but also the life that could have been. What further deepened the tragedy was the realization that she had never truly found peace. Peace in her relationships, in her career, or within herself. Her image was both a reflection of the woman she was and a mask she wore to navigate the harsh world of fame. In the years that followed, Marilyn Monroe's life became a subject of endless speculation, documentaries, biographies, and even conspiracy theories. She was remembered not only for her beauty, her performances, and her glamour but also for the deeply human aspects of her story. Her emotional fragility, her search for love, and her battle with loneliness and inner demons. Monroe's image is, to this day, one of the most iconic in pop culture. The famous photograph of her standing over the subway grate, her white dress billowing in the wind, remains one of the most instantly recognizable images in history. Her platinum blonde hair, bright red lips, and curvaceous figure made her the epitome of 1950s Hollywood glamour. And this image of her has been immortalized in countless works of art, advertisements, and films. Yet, beneath the surface of this glamorous image was a woman who longed to be understood beyond her physical appearance. Marilyn was often reduced to a stereotype, a dumb blonde, a seductress, a figure of desire. What most people did not see was the woman behind the image, the woman who struggled with self-esteem, emotional pain, and the pressures of living up to the impossible standards set by the Hollywood machine. In her final years, Monroe expressed a desire to be seen as more than just a beauty. She wanted to be recognized for her talents as an actress, as an artist who could bring depth and complexity to her roles. Her performance in The Misfits, 1961, written by Arthur Miller, was a powerful reflection of her true abilities. A performance that went beyond the superficial roles she had been cast in. Yet, even in this film, Marilyn found herself confined by her public persona. She was praised for her emotional vulnerability. But critics often only saw the dumb blonde, who had captivated audiences years earlier. Over time, Marilyn Monroe's status evolved from a movie star to a cultural symbol, one that transcended her work in Hollywood. The Marilyn Monroe mystique grew exponentially after her death. As people began to recognize the contrast between her public image and her private struggles, she became a symbol of beauty and tragic vulnerability, an example of the price of fame and the fragility of the human spirit. Her image has been used, reproduced, and reinterpreted in countless ways. Artists like Andy Warhol famously created a series of portraits that featured Monroe, elevating her to the level of art itself. Warhol's colorful depictions, which took the glamorous, smiling face of Monroe and repeated it in a way that blurred the lines between celebrity and commodity, transformed her into a piece of modern art. An icon that would continue to speak to future generations. Through Warhol's lens, Monroe became a symbol of both glamour and the commodification of beauty, a duality that reflected the tensions within her own life. In the decades that followed her death, Monroe became a recurring figure in popular culture. From the fashion world to music to literature, her legacy was embraced and revisited. Musicians like Madonna and Britney Spears paid homage to her with looks and performances that mirrored Monroe's own style. Films, songs, and books about her life continued to draw audiences, fascinated by the woman who had come to represent both the dream and the nightmare of stardom. Marilyn's influence could be felt in the emergence of female pop culture figures in the 1980s and 1990s, who embodied a mix of sexuality, vulnerability, and strength. These modern icons, such as Madonna and Lady Gaga, not only paid tribute to Marilyn Monroe's style, but also echoed her struggles, particularly the battle between maintaining a public persona and grappling with personal pain. Though Marilyn Monroe was often viewed as the ultimate symbol of feminine beauty, her life and legacy have also contributed to conversations about gender, identity, and feminism. Her story, marked by exploitation, objectification, and personal struggle, challenges traditional notions of the ideal woman. In many ways, Marilyn Monroe broke the mold of the conventional female star in Hollywood. She was a woman who commanded attention, yet was constantly under scrutiny for her beauty and sexuality. Her success was built on the image of the dumb blonde. But as an actress, she defied that stereotype, showing that a woman who possessed great beauty could also demonstrate intelligence, depth, and emotional complexity. The reality of Monroe's life, her battles with mental illness, addiction, and loneliness, was far from the idealized image that Hollywood projected. Her story has since become a powerful symbol in feminist discussions about how women are treated in the media, particularly regarding the ways in which their bodies are commodified. Monroe was not just an object of desire, but a woman who struggled to assert herself as more than the sum of her parts. Though she was often objectified and exploited by the industry, she also sought to create space for herself as an actress who could command respect. In the years following her death, the feminist movement began to revisit her life as a complex narrative of vulnerability, beauty, and self-determination. Marilyn Monroe became a symbol of the woman caught between the desire for public admiration and the need for private peace. Her struggles with mental health, addiction, and fame were examined through a feminist lens, highlighting how the demands of the entertainment industry and society at large had profoundly impacted her personal well-being. In 1982, a group of admirers and supporters formed the Marilyn Monroe Foundation to honor her memory and preserve her legacy. The foundation's mission was to provide funding for various cultural and humanitarian projects, aiming to promote Monroe's values of beauty, art, and social impact. The foundation has been instrumental in ensuring that Monroe's contributions to the arts are celebrated. Through exhibitions, charitable events, and public recognition, the legacy of Marilyn Monroe has been preserved and passed on to future generations. Her image continues to inspire filmmakers, actors, and artists, while her life story serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities of fame, the human desire for love, and the fragility of the human spirit. As the years pass, Marilyn Monroe's legacy remains as potent as ever. Her image is still used in advertising, art, and fashion. Today, Monroe's status as a cultural icon is unwavering. Her legacy has been explored and celebrated in everything from books, documentaries, and films to stage performances and tribute concerts. Every year, thousands of people visit her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and her films continue to be cherished by new generations of viewers. Her life is not just remembered for her image of beauty, but for the poignant and tragic story that she left behind. Marilyn Monroe represents the intersection of fame and suffering, beauty and vulnerability, glamour and tragedy. She is a symbol of how the entertainment industry often demands so much from its stars, pushing them to the brink of destruction. Yet through it all, she remains beloved, admired, and immortalized in the hearts of millions. In a world that still grapples with issues of body image, fame, and mental health, Marilyn Monroe's life and legacy are more relevant than ever. She is not simply remembered for the glittering world she inhabited, but for the pain she endured and the complex, multifaceted person she was. Marilyn Monroe is a reminder that behind every iconic image, there is a person with dreams, fears, struggles, and desires. Her legacy will continue to inspire those who seek to understand the human condition, the need for love, acceptance, and belonging, and the price that is often paid for fame. Marilyn Monroe's life may have been short, but her legacy is vast and enduring. Her beauty, her voice, and her tragic story continue to captivate the world. Marilyn Monroe's journey from Norma Jean Mortensen to a Hollywood legend serves as a powerful reminder of the complexities of fame, the struggles of self-worth, and the emotional toll of living in the public eye. She remains an icon, not just for her appearance but for her humanity, the desire for love, the need to be seen as more than just a pretty face, and the pain of never truly finding peace. Marilyn Monroe's legacy is one of contradiction, strength, and vulnerability, and it is this combination that makes her story so compelling, timeless, and unforgettable. Her story continues to resonate with audiences, reminding us that behind the glamour, the lights, and the fame, there is often a deep, unresolved sadness, a sadness that, despite the best efforts of the world's greatest stars, may never be fully healed.